So let's see, 6:31. So good evening and welcome everyone to our August general meeting of the Broomfield Democratic Party. And this is going to be a very good meeting. Do you have this slide deck, Gary or Peggy, to put up?
I can share the screen if that would be helpful, Neil.
Sure.
Okay. Hi, Jennifer.
Can you put
Hello.
that in? There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. So our people showing up keep climbing, but let's get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. And for those who haven't been in our recent Zoom meetings, we just all unmute ourselves and say the pledge together. And it's all out of sync and it sounds wonderful. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the
of the
United
United States
of America
and
to the republic
for which
for
it
which it
stands,
stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
liberty and
and
justice for all.
For all.
That probably drives everyone nuts, but I kind of enjoy it. So we're moving into the early stages of campaign season. We have the city and county elections coming up and also school board elections coming up in November. A couple of events that are starting in 2 days. James Marsh Holshin, who's running for council in Ward 1, has his campaign kickoff at 3 o'clock on Saturday, 1 to 3. No, at 3 o'clock, James? Yeah. And you can get his information. I think we have it posted on our Facebook page and also on his Facebook page, and he has his Gmail account up there if you want it to contact him and ask what's going on and how you can help him. July 24th is our, I guess, quarterly open space cleanup where we meet at the Bruner Farmhouse. That's 8 till 10 o'clock. July 25th is Devin's campaign kickoff for his re-election in Ward 3. You can see there at Broadwinds West Park, 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock. And his email account is up there. Yeah. And you can also find him on Facebook and all of those. The 31st, Guyleen's canvassing kickoff. She already had her campaign kickoff a few weeks ago, which was great. Her canvass kickoff will be at Quail Creek Park from 10 till 12. And the same thing, her email's there, and you can find her on Gmail and postings on the Broomfield Dems Facebook page and such. August 10th, these are important. Redistricting Commission is having public hearings, and they're having these all over the state. August 10th is one up in Longmont and one in Boulder, which are sort of the nearest ones for us. The one in Boulder is on the 12th, which I think is the night of our August meeting. But there are also meetings in Commerce City and Denver, and there's several around the area, and it really is going to be important to provide any input that you have about how you want how you want us to be represented in both the state house, state senate, and then the congressional districts. August 12th again is actually our first back in-person post-COVID meeting. It'll be at the Broomfield Community Center, the newly rebuilt community center. So it is where we used to meet, but it's completely different. And that will be, as usual, 6:30 to 8. Let's see what else there. And then August 21st, if you haven't been to the Broomfield Dems, get the scoop. They're great. It's an ice cream social. It's August 21st, 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock. It's at the Girl Scout shelter in Midway Park, which is where it's been every year but last year. And it's really good. Jonah Goose is confirmed to be there, Matt Gray. We're working on a few other people to show up. And there's always a lot of people. It's candidates will be there, so it's a good chance to just hang out and schmooze with candidates and get to know them a little better than you often can get to know them, including Joe. He loves just hanging out with people. Okay, so that's the
August 25th should be first thinking liberally.
Oh,
John, I apologize. That's my error. I'll add it.
It's okay.
so that's Wednesday, August 25th, John, is that
Yes.
right? And it starts at
At 6 o'clock at Del Vecchio's.
6 o'clock at Del Vecchio's. Del Vecchio's is right next to the King Soopers on 287 and start to say Midway. What is that?
Miramonte.
Miramonte, the other M Street. And those are fun too, and it's the same thing. Candidates will show up and such, but it's really just hanging out with each other. And you can eat dinner there or just have a drink or dessert or something and hang out and get to know each other. Okay. So tonight, introducing our elected officials, and I can't really see who's on here. I see Devin Schaff, our Ward 3 council member. Who else? Guyleen is here, of course. Who else is here? Speak up.
Heidi.
Heidi Henkel from Ward 5.
Laurie Anderson.
Lori is here. She's one of our council members in Ward 4. I think that's it. It'll be so nice to be in person and we can actually see each other.
This is Matt. Neil, I'm here too, but I am on the agenda,
Matt,
so I'll
good,
be on the
'cause you're
agenda when I'm
supposed-
on the agenda. So I'll wait until
You're
then.
supposed to speak, so I'm glad you're here. And then Colorado Conversations is a series of conversations that the Colorado Democratic Party has been putting on. I think they stole the name, converted it from the Broomfield Conversations. Is that what they were, Peggy?
There was a Broomfield Conversations last year.
Yeah.
I don't know if they stole it, but
I'll just say they stole it.
yeah. Okay.
So you can, I think that's on a separate slide, isn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe to show that.
Yeah.
Those are all the different ones. Last month was LGBTQ equality and gender equity that Guyleen was one of the panel members on. That was very good. And you can see the next one, no, that's July 1. July 17th, parenting in the era of COVID. August 5th, fixing our education system, our water and our environment, frontline heroes. So there's some really good topics, and these are held monthly, and they really can get into depth on some different issues: protecting our voting rights in October, affordable housing, reforming criminal justice, and immigration reform. So those, you can find, I think you can find that on our Facebook page. We'll make sure you can. And also on the Colorado Democratic Party page. But the ones I've been to have been really, really good, informative discussions. Okay, flip back the screen. So we have a few minutes, a little update on the Board of Adjustments from Michael Freed. And this will be pretty quick, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, something like that. Michael, are you here? Michael's a member of the Board of Adjustments, new board member as of the spring.
I don't.
Neil, I haven't seen Michael yet, so maybe we need to skip forward here.
Okay. Well, moving on. Jennifer Hoffman, our city and county manager, is here. And Jennifer's background is quite amazing. Masters of Public Administration, you can read a lot of this stuff here. But she's been working, she worked in, I guess, private public relations for quite a while. But she's been working for the city and county of Broomfield for 20 years in different parts of the city, the court system, inside the city manager's office itself, and then became the city manager herself in 2019, I believe. Yeah, when Charles Osaki retired. And I think she's been doing just a great job, really helping Broomfield grow. Broomfield, 20 years ago when it became a county, it was much smaller than it is. I don't know the exact numbers, but we've been growing, and it has been a struggle for the city and county government to keep up with the growth, all the new things that people need, rebuilding rec centers, building new, public health buildings and such. We're growing into a little city that's pretty awesome. And Jennifer's handling all of that stuff, let alone handling COVID through the last year, along with the rest of her staff and council. Those people were working their butts off. And I ran into Jennifer somewhere after that calmed down a bit, and she said it was her first weekend not working in over a year. So we owe a lot to Jennifer and the whole city and county staff and council. So Jennifer, why don't you pick that up and go ahead? And I think you're set up for screen sharing.
You're muted, Jennifer.
I sure appreciate that, Neil. It's always humbling, and I'm grateful that you all asked us here tonight. I have Abby Hellman, the Assistant City County Manager. Perhaps the next few meetings, if there's ever an agenda item or a hot topic or something that you all would like, whether it's a 10-minute or a 15-minute kind of highlight, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to, it's one of the parts that actually does fill our cup through the myriad of things that we do every day. It's the community outreach and engagement that certainly makes it all worthwhile for me. So I appreciate the gracious comments, Neil, and look forward, but nothing great things to come as we move forward. So feel free to interrupt anytime during this. Neil and Peggy have been terrific about what some of the highlights are. Clearly, we love what we do, and so we can kind of go down a rabbit hole with regards to passion in any particular area. So well-versed with any topic that you all want to communicate about tonight. But we did want to move through a little bit. I think I'd be well-versed at this by now. Can you see that screen?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. So you're all vastly familiar with where our spot is in between Denver and Boulder. It's one of the reasons that we continue to grow exponentially, in addition to all the services that we continue to provide. So here's a snapshot. I won't read each one of these off. It's always enthralling when you get into your 50s. I'm coming up on 55, and still surprises me when people read every single line item when they do a power presentation. So I'm not going to do that tonight. Suffices to say some of the highlights, and the reason I call out the 34 square miles, and Mayor Castriata still kind of stumbles from the lips a little bit, has been a real pivotal player for us moving through the last 9 months. So not only did we accomplish a tremendous amount during COVID, but we fundamentally shifted what our budgeting methodology is, our financial contribution methodology, debt contributions, and also how we develop. So we are no longer taking a one piecemeal approach with anything having to do economic development, but a totality of circumstances from a comprehensive view and also from a sustainable perspective. So we don't make decisions in a vacuum or one piece at a time, so that we are clear about what happens next in those 34 square miles, whether it be open field development, infill development, or redevelopment. We pride ourselves that we have more miles of trails and bike paths than roads, nearing the 40% goal. We're about 34%. Clearly, as we continue towards build out, it becomes more and more challenging because those open lands that have not been dedicated open space or haven't been purchased yet, it's a hot commodity. Real estate is a commodity in our 34 square miles. As Neil said, we're at 73. From when I started, we were at 24,000. I can remember the milestone when we hit 25,000 population. We were very excited because it had opened up some additional funding for housing for us. Oh, sorry about that. Labor force, median household income. One of the fascinating pieces from our residents' perspective, 86% work outside of Broomfield. It's going to be fascinating as we go into 22 and 23, those years, to see the residuals of COVID and working from home. So the conversation that we will now be having is not a brick and mortar business approach, but more of what the capabilities are internally and what services we need to provide to support those folks that will be working from home. Our estimation and gap analysis is by the end of 2024, 86% will drop to about 66%. So we'll see a 22% guesstimated of folks staying home, working from home, and utilizing the services significantly more. Trade-off is they won't be on the roads as much. So again, the next 3 to 5 years for us will be pretty fascinating. We'll talk a little bit more about property taxes in just a minute, but the median house price, you choke on this amount. For those of us, I bought my first house when I was 21, and I paid $41,000, and it was less than many people's car payment now. So my daughter just purchased a home, and I didn't weigh in on the amount that she paid for it, given that it was a first home. But we're seeing it throughout Colorado and throughout the nation. The nation believes that the bubble will occur in 10 to 12 months with housing. That is not the forecast for the state of Colorado. State of Colorado, from OSPB, which is the Office of Budget and Planning at the state, as well as from the federal government, and my friend Matt will be able to attest to this, they don't foresee a bubble in sight. So that is something that we also have to keep in mind when we move forward. Average apartment price and rents are higher. It's just, it's part of where we are right now. And the impetus on affordable housing / attainable housing is something that you all know this council has made a priority. They've made great strides, and we continue to build that in our 34 square mile economic development plan moving forward. 18th best place to live, pretty remarkable. Out of tens of thousands of places in the criteria is fairly tight on how you fit into that category. Most recently, we've been named the 9th best place in the country to work remotely, which feeds into the conversation that we were just having about noting that switch from the 86% working from home or working outside of Broomfield will now be working from home, particularly when this number continues to increase on the work remote. Another, from a sustainability perspective, top state, top green. Colorado continues to pride itself and continues to work in that direction. I know that Mayor Castriata met with Lieutenant Governor this morning. She and I and Jared are actually having dinner in beautiful Broomfield up in Arista on Thursday evening. As much as we can possibly be in alignment, we know this from a city county perspective as well for our teams. When we are in alignment from council with our priorities, there isn't anything that we cannot get accomplished. It's only when we divert attention, focus, and energy in a multitude of areas that then you begin to dilute what those high level contributions are. And Colorado's been a real leader in going green. This is a pretty fascinating graph. Some of you have been able to have the opportunity to work with Jeff Romine. He is an economist by background, but a jack of all trades. And his contributions to our new leadership team have really been remarkable. This is a graph from him. I don't want to say it's a surprise, but quite frankly, it helps guide our conversations. I remember 5 to 7 years ago when our staff was talking about retirements. I myself had never thought about retirement until about 5 years ago. And then you get a real eye-opening shock from what that means from a community perspective, a service level perspective, and what that adaptability is going to be required. So we keep hearing about the silver tsunami. This slide does not reflect a silver tsunami. What it does reflect from a staffing perspective, and we're feeling it now and we have over the last 18 months, key positions that have historical knowledge and institutional knowledge. It's never been more important to have a succession plan and a warm handoff. It's also important to note that the golden key approach that served a lot of organizations well in the past is not where we are. It's not where we are now, and it will never be again. You need a team approach, you need collaborative effort, and you need several people understanding what the goal and vision is that have a multitude of skill sets in order to get us there. So we are really feeling the baby boomer push right now. Generation X, which is me by a year. So I don't know if I think I have more tendencies toward the baby boomers, but we'll see as those years grow. The millennials, we hear a lot about millennials are just a different category altogether. And the movement and shift from an internal organization, clearly, CCOB, our biggest part of our budget, we'll talk about in just a minute, is personnel. And accommodating that workforce, and I don't mean accommodation with any kind of negative connotation whatsoever. We've had phenomenal success with our millennials. Adapting, moving, shifting, they want to be tantalized. Sometimes they want to work at 10 p.m. or 2 a.m. So again, accommodating that schedule is really key. And also the stimulation. So the days of having the majority of people do the same thing every day, it's gone. So living in ambiguity, being adaptable, being resourceful, having resilience, those are all really key attributes, quite frankly, that a lot of our new folks that are in this millennial category are bringing to the table. So Peggy and Neil wanted to go over kind of high-level budget information and also impacts from some legislation with regards to property tax. This is a very simplistic by revenue. So this is our 2021 revenue. Again, because of the swift movement that we took early on COVID, our long-term implications and impacts aren't anywhere near a lot of our neighboring communities. We will see this more in 2022 with regards to budget from our neighboring communities. The fact that Broomfield has a diversified revenue stream, we're able to absorb not only the COVID impacts, but retail itself is changing significantly. And it's not something that it's not recovering from past retail. Retail is a different animal now. So our revenues, you can look at those groups there. And if you want me to go into any more detail, I'm certainly happy to do that. Our estimation for 22 and 23. So again, the annual budget, I don't look at anything for where we are right now. Where we are is a snapshot. I think what's key to Broomfield as we move forward is a sustainable approach. And that means that we take into account and consideration where we will be 5 years from now. So the decisions that we make now will impact positively and negatively. We need to ensure that we have that broad-based, resilient piece that we can absorb what the unknowns are to a certain extent. So you'll understand what this interfund transfers means in just a minute. So revenues, 400 million. And here are the expenditures. And you'll note that the expenditures indicate 448 million. So of course, the first question, and the mayor asked this as soon as she saw it a couple months back, but $48 million difference. In the past on our budgeting, again, we've taken a very different approach to our budgeting. And that is when we have interfund transfers or pass-throughs. We always counted pass-throughs on the revenue stream, but if we know we're going to pass through those funds, I don't want them included in the overall budget because those dollars we already know are going to have to come in, they hit, it's a short period of time, then they go back out. So those pass-through funds are our business development agreements. So when we have developments that come in and they take a portion, we agree to a portion of sales tax. We agree to a portion of property tax. We collect the special district funds. We collect North Metro funds. We immediately take those fund dollars, we square it up with what those development agreements look like, and then we pass it through. So that's why you'll see the different amounts. I want to be able to provide council with actuals rather than budgeted amount. And in years past, we've done a lot of work on the budgeted amounts, and then we reconcile several times throughout the year. If we know we're not going to have it to spend it, that's why I consider it to be a pass-through. That's the difference.
Hey, Jennifer.
Yes.
What's a fiduciary fund expenditure?
So a fiduciary, that's part of what we're talking about right now. So our fiduciary duty when we enter into business development agreements, we make sure that those folks know that when we collect the money, we're going to pay them. So those are those pass-through funds, Peggy. Thanks for that question.
And so that 36.5%, Jennifer, is money that just flows through that are previous commitments and so they just become payable. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Simply put, that's exactly right. And they're fluid, right? And so all the more reason so Brenda Ritchie, I'm sure for those of you who've been around a long time, Pat Soderberg was our finance director for geez, just as long as I can remember, and had the a lot of how the budget operated before was part and parcel of when we would shore it up, right? And so you hear a lot about zero-based budgeting, and it's touted as really being this remarkable tool. Zero-based budgeting is a tool that's effective when your structure supports zero-based budgeting, but there's always a way around zero-based budgeting. And essentially that is you overinflate your budget. So departments will ask for a lot more than they need because they want to make sure that if in fact they need it, they don't have to come back and ask for it.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do need it, they don't have to jump through hoops in order to get it. The problem with that, we just had this 4-hour budgeting finance meeting today. The problem with that is you're tying up dollars that then go into a rollover every year. You're not allocating those dollars, which then influences your prioritization. It's not a real number. So as we zero in, and so Brenda Ritchie, who's our new CFO, comes from the private sector, federal sector, state sector, and has a tremendous amount of background in the structure that is needed to support budgeting that is fluid, comprehensive, and balanced. So you wouldn't balance your household budget on your savings account.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm
with you.
I want a balanced budget for the city and county of Broomfield, that your savings account is not your even rollover account. So you have your reserves, then you have your operations, and then you have your expenditures. What you expend should match what your revenue is. Your shortage shouldn't be rolled back in.
I love this.
Well, good. So
it means it's trued up. There's no messing around.
Yes. And again, it's a long-term sustainable approach. So every year we have anywhere between, so when the community hears we're going to have a $20 million rollover. We're going to have a $20 million rollover. And this doesn't include COVID funds, right? So again, in years past, we've included those one-time hits. We don't want to include any of these one-time hits because you can't bank on something that you're going to need the next year based on a one-time hit. So that's a separate category of funding. So and the citizens may, think, holy cow, we're in such great shape. This is so, well, part of that is about $5 million that has been overinflated for years from departmental budgets. We're going through a seismic shift right now that says you have to ask for what you need, and our spending patterns have to be evaluated. So we're doing a very deep forensic dive into what it is that you spend, and then we're blanketing in what that future looks like. We haven't done a good job about that. So when we had a bunch of rooftops, we don't come back to the overall program and say, how many employees do we need in order to service that, right? Broomfield's always been the lean and mean, which that's great until you're breaking the backs of your best employees that we continue to be rated so highly on. So again, shoring things up and having providing for our council numbers that they can make well-informed, well-educated decisions. It's not staff's place to shore up a balanced budget. It's staff's place to say, we're bringing in less than we need. And then we have conversations about You decrease services, you increase property tax, and you reprioritize. But that's council's role in order to do that. It isn't staff's. It's a partnership. So again, the approach is very different than we've had in the past.
Jennifer,
Yes.
can you give us an example of what is a fiduciary expenditure and where does the revenue come from?
Sure. So, yeah, well here, you know what? Let's go to let's go to this slide right here.
Yes.
So a lot of folks, Neil, and we hear it a lot. And when we got the results of the citizen survey, we're going to be talking to council about it on a whole host of items. One of them is we hear a lot about, are we getting the services that we should be getting for these exorbitant property taxes? So for example, and so when a resident writes out their check for their property tax, it's a big dollar amount. Most folks think that all of those dollars come into CCOB and it's those dollars that goes into our coffer for the revenue. It isn't. And I'll get back to that fiduciary in just a second, Neil. But this is a very basic example. But 7.15, which is going to be decreased, right, for your property taxes. So when you get that assessed evaluation sheet in the mail and you look at all of those people don't really look at all those line items. I'm going to show you here in a slide in just a minute where for every dollar, what that distribution is. But for example, for the fiduciary, we collect for the school district. So when when all of those funds come in on the overall, so you'll see 481 for the median household, assessed valuation is 34,000. Based on where you live in Broomfield, your mills are going to be different. For example, Adams County, those that live in the Adams County School District, your mills are 68. If you live in in BVSD, your mills are 54. That's a big, it's an enormous difference. So for every mill, it's about $1,000 is the difference. So if you're looking at somebody writing a check for $5,000, that school district is getting almost it's about 45% of your assessed valuation goes to the school districts. That is considered a fiduciary duty. North Metro Fire, that's considered a fiduciary duty. All of the business development agreements. So when we enter into baseline, for example, the average package is 50%. 50% Broomfield gives back to the developer for the infrastructure, for the upfront costs. And then again, we layer on whether it's in an urban renewal area. I mean, there's just a whole host of complex methodologies based on where the house is. So this is a very basic, overview, if you will. So you can kind of see North Metro Fire District of that 5,000 is 500. Broomfield is 28 mills, which is the county. City is 11. So when you and then Health and Human Services, and then the Mile High Flood District. So when folks think that all of those funds are coming to us, and again, just in general terms, every rooftop in Broomfield, the services that Broomfield delivers and the amenities and particularly from the open space, the trails, library, parks, etc. It's about $3,000 per rooftop is what it costs us to service that home. The average revenue that's generated per rooftop is about $1,300. So between $1,300 and $3,000, that gap is the priority that Broomfield residents and city council has set to say, we are going to keep services at a significantly higher level. If you go to any other communities, North Glen, Thornton, Westy, Erie, Longmont, Louisville, their services are not on par with where ours are on par. So their service deliveries is less expensive than what ours is and continues to be, because that's what the community demands. Staff is going to do a more thorough education, particularly from an outreach and engagement perspective, so that people really do understand that it's your city council that has prioritized that staff close that gap from that service delivery model. So again, when we have commercial development at 29%, it's the commercial development that allows us those high level of services for the residents. So when you look at Adams County, North Glen, Thornton, Westy, to a certain extent, you have a bunch of residences. There's not a balance. Broomfield's been very good, and it behooves us now, because we're nearing build out. We have to be really mindful of what that balance looks like, because the more rooftops you have, the more expensive it is. The less commercial you have, the less offset you have. And then you come back to reduce services, increase taxes. It's a really simple formulation in order to keep those service levels where they need to be. Neil, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You bet.
I want to say, Jennifer, can you go
Yes.
back?
Oh,
It's
of course.
Peggy. And okay, so I want to say what you just said with smaller words.
Sure.
What you just said is commercial businesses support the tax base in Broomfield. And the balance between residential and commercial is a really important thing to understand, and that our tax dollars around property tax are providing substantially more services because of a couple things. One is we've got the balance right that I just talked about. And the other one is we've got some school districts that are funded well. Is that true?
Everything up to school districts being funded well.
Okay.
So that's a relative term. And so Matt can fill in on this too, but on those school districts, Peggy,
Yeah.
in order to be funded, so Colorado is 48th. It's embarrassing and sickening to say, in my opinion. We fund our schools. There's 47 states that prioritize funding more than we do with regards to education. So and that's the negative factor. I'm gonna try to simplify this. The negative factor that Colorado's been working under for a really long time. So we are 325 million funding under the zero factor. So that negative, so when the state comes and says, yeah, you know, we're shoring up that negative factor a little bit by 25 million or 30 million, that means there's a really deep hole. And in order to get out of that hole, there's going to have to be a really seismic shift in priorities. The difficulty is, where will that money come from? So for those of us that are over 50, you will remember it was the cataclysmic mix of Gallagher, Tabor, and Amendment 23. Those three items combined together really did, and I'm gonna be wise with my words here, but any one of those in and of themselves probably would not have impacted a long-term sustainable budget. But when you combine the three of them, it creates a real chasm that without policy, funding, shift, mindset, focus, we won't ever get out of that. So overall, are schools well-funded? They are not. And that's why they continue to they go back out to the voters to say, we need operations and we need capital improvements. And the voters know that increases that mill levy. Adams County has that's a really high mill levy when you look at other mill levies throughout the state. So I guess it'd be, who you ask as far as schools being well funded.
Gotcha. I'm with you. Okay.
So would
I
you
know
say-
we've interrupted you a bunch. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, please, no, that's what this is all about. Please continue.
Would you say the property taxes for schools is okay, but the state funding is what's hurting us?
No, I mean, again, it's John, it's good to see you, sir. It's all of it. There is no, and there's no silver bullet. And so the school districts continue to rely on rooftops that feed their schools because the state continues to not be able to fund at a level that provides a per pupil. So there's per pupil funding. It's about $7,000 now per pupil per year. And we're 48th, just to put it in perspective. So the property taxes are reflective of the schools trying to get to where they need to be because of the need to shore up on the other funding. So it's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It just is. And the methodology of property tax residential rates, 7.15, the new legislation for a temporary timeout is going to take, and we'll talk about that in just a minute, to 6.8, but that doesn't seem like a big decrease. It's going to mean about a 3.5 million decrease for Broomfield. But those funds, John, it's again, it's going to require a multi-pronged approach to do anything. The commercial, however, is at 29%. So that's why when we talk about that balance for those commercial, that's why we moving forward. I told you a little bit about, the mayor's been really fundamental in helping us shift a lot of this community development conversation, that it's not just a project by project impact. So when we have developers that come in and say, hey, we got this great residential property, and it's, even if it's all affordable, right? And the property's zoned commercial, we need to really look at that. So then that's the competing interests, right? That's the difficult part for council, because you have competing priorities. You want affordable housing. Affordable housing is expensive, not just to build, but we're going to subsidize it because Broomfield's expensive and the land here is expensive. But it all comes back to those mill levies, and that's the dichotomy between BVSD and Adams County. BVSD has a different funding structure from not only from the state, because everybody gets per pupil funding. It's the same across the board. But all of the other accoutrements and amenities, it makes a difference. When you have newer schools, you don't have to put money into capital. When you're able to subsidize your teachers' salaries, you don't just look straight across the board at just what the state can do.
So some of the nearby states have like free college education. A lot of their schools are funded by oil and gas taxes, and our taxes in this state for the oil and gas are super low.
Well, I haven't kind of drill down to kind of get that funding mechanism, but we do know, you know, the U.S. education system, whether you're funded or whether you're not, right? You're not having these states turn out. And here's another really interesting piece. I'm going to segue just for just a sidebar really quickly. 10 to 12 to 15 years ago, the impetus was all about STEM. STEM, 4-year college. You know, if your kid doesn't do STEM or go to a 4-year college, and then society as a whole started moving down that path. You know where our gap is? It's our blue collar. It's our stereotypical, standard, old school, no plumbers, no electricians, no journeymen, no craftsmen. We have so focused on STEM that this entire we have a really enormous gap. So we need to reduce that stigma, and that's part of what our workforce center is doing now is upskilling. But it all goes back to that hardcore education piece. You know, outcomes, people don't expect much when you're 48th, to be really honest with you. Now, if you're second and your results and your outcomes of your students are not top notch, then that's a whole different conversation.
So let me interrupt a second. Let's hold off any other questions and let Jennifer get on a roll here. And we don't want to take too much of Matt's time.
Sure.
But Matt, I think in the past has taken some of other people's time.
So property tax dollars, you can see again, just reiterating, almost 50% go to the school, 15 to county services. So when we say service levels are high, we don't just mean, you know, the aesthetics. We also mean, you know, because we're a city and county, we have a jail, we have health and human services, and those services are platinum level as well. This is the, so we've already talked about this, again, we'll just reiterate here. So there is a legislation that was passed, and so again, it's not good, it's not bad, it just is. A lot of folks think that if you don't take my property tax and put it back in my pocket, then I can decide where I want to spend it. Versus our service level doesn't decrease. What does decrease is our general fund balance to the tune of about 3.1 million for 2022. 2020, and so there's 3 pieces of this legislation. I'm not going to get into all of them, but the third component that's also about $3.2 million outside of this one. So this is, we've already taken this into account. So Brenda, that's what we've been doing over the last 10 days with our budget conversations. We've already had this reduction put in our budget. So A, it's not a surprise. B, we're planning for it. C, we can absorb it. And it's a 2-year timeout. So the 3.1 will be 22 impact, 3.1 2023. There's a ballot initiative. I don't know, Maddie might know more about this, but
I was saying, first off, the guy who passed that law was both a jerk and very good looking. And second of all, it's called Initiative 27. And I can explain why we did the things that we did when you're done. But the Initiative 27, which has not made the ballot yet, but is backed by Americans for Prosperity. And I've been asked twice at the King Supers in Broomfield to sign the petition, including once. Sure, the guy knows me now. And I actually explained to him I was a state representative who passed the bill to undermine the thing that he's doing right now. And we're actually friends now. Anyway, we can get to that. But Initiative 27, and it's really complicated. I won't go through the whole thing, but I'll explain why we did what we did in this bill and what Initiative 27 will do. And I'll do that briefly when I start talking.
Perfect. These are our priorities set by council. And again, all of these have dollars attached and staff as well. So sustainability is new. We now have we have a staff of 4 now. Let's see, we'll just go through. So sustainability, we have an ACES committee. It's driving a lot of work. It's driving a lot of great ideas. It's driving a lot of paradigm shifts for Broomfield and for the state. It doesn't come cheap. So thus it's a council priority. And again, as we move through each one of these priorities, each one comes at a cost. So this is an interesting graphic. So again, affordable, attainable. This is to give you all, and can you, I don't know, can you see this? This really drills down. We wanted a sense of, so it's not just what you sell the home for, right? And so when people say 385,000, that's not affordable. That's the bottom, that's the very basic bottom fund. Land is expensive, materials are expensive. So when you have something in perpetuity, we have to take that into account long-term and short-term, right? And so AMI, I don't know, so average median income. So Section 8 housing is on par with about 30% of AMI, just to give you a sense. Our affordable housing, inclusionary zoning mandates that residential developers that come in, if it's a for sale property, you have to do 10% of the units at 80% AMI. If it's a rental property, you have to do 20% at AMI. A lot of the developers, particularly in Broomfield, as we move forward, that is a difficult threshold, 60%. So we have some that are mixed now, right? 40, 50, 60. We have one that's going down that has that 30% AMI. But from a community perspective, affordable housing is expensive for a community to have, to hold, to keep. It's a high dollar value. Economic vitality, this goes back to the portions of being so mindful. We have a development matrix we've been working on for about 16 months actually, that really defines our 34 square miles. And then we segregated it into 6 categories. What can go in each one of those categories with regards to housing, sustainability, affordability, walkability, bikeability, density. A lot of people think they want density, and then we start showing pictures about what density looks like, and all of a sudden they don't like density so much anymore. Affordable housing is density. You in order to get what we want to get in Broomfield, to meet those goals, you got to go up. You can't go out. The footprint needs to be small and tall. So we've completed a master development agreement in Baseline. We're super excited about that. Because of the partnership with staff and council and our developer, they went out for $37 million in their most recent bond run for municipal bonds. Within 50 minutes, they had $300 million sitting on the table. They were eager to participate, a multitude of bond financiers. The letter that they wrote us was primarily the reason they were able to attract that is because of the partnership. People with expendable funds want to know that where they're putting their money is a community that has a good partnership with the developers. It's not acrimonious, nor is it something that provides uncertainty for the development community. Broomfield Town Square, we're bringing that back to council on August 31st. Long awaited, I understand that. The last 7 years have been about how great it is, what it looks like, all the great accoutrements that it will bring. And now I get the fun job of saying, how much is it going to cost? And putting those dollar amounts. So we'll come back to council with the package on the 31st, continuation of conversations. Flatirons, huge. Flatirons Mall, Flatirons Marketplace. Flatirons Marketplace has not been doing well for the last 7 or 8 years. We can continue to choke on that. We have a developer, Mace Rich, who is nationally renowned for this kind of work. They've been spectacular to work with. We're bringing a concept review to council actually next Tuesday night. This is huge for Broomfield. It really is part of what our adaptable future looks like with mixed use, flex space, and residential in order to offset it, because for developers, residential is where the money is. Water, you all, I don't know if you've been following or not, but our two separate pieces, the Chimney Hollow facility, which is the Windy Gap, we are moving through right now. Council has made the decision that we will be doing independent financing, which was also a change. The last 15 years, we were planning on doing group financing. Oftentimes I feel like Darth Vader when I come into these. It's in the 11th hour. We do a forensic dive. That's not the direction that I would recommend City and County of Broomfield going. It's essentially it'd be co-signing for some other entities, and everything's really great until it isn't. So we will be doing that independent financing. And we're working with our bond runs right now and Moody's with our interest rates. We continue to come back to council for those updates. First reading on that ordinance is on the 19th. This is one of my most important, fills my cup, is our DEI work. And so when we talk about DEI, we walk the walk. This is not something that is going to be a hot topic for a year and then move. I think our community is juicy and ready and eager and really ready to open up the hearts and the minds. We've started internally with our staff. We've had mandatory training. That's another piece in Broomfield that some of the other communities, everything from just having food fairs internationally. We've taken the approach that equity is who we are. It's not what we do, it's who we are. And so it's been a mixed bag of our staff. Again, these are difficult conversations, and the reason they're difficult is because it's worth it. So these are just some of the things that we've been doing. What's next? Again, it's embedded in our communications. We've done an equity audit with regards to pay. We've done an equity forensic scrape of our policies all the way down to recruiting, messaging, who we contract with. And our mayor has been a real champion with me in this endeavor, and great things to come. I saved this one for last just because I wanted everything to kind of be happy and good. And oil and gas, they're coming back. They have provided us the 30-day notice and also a very basic schedule. We anticipate that they will descend again in our yard and in our house starting in September. It will be a full court press. By January, we anticipate they will be operating on all three areas: drilling, fracking, and completing. Part of the agreement is that they will be out December 2022. What does that mean? That means that we will be enduring exploration and operations for the next 18 months. Engage with us. Most of you already do. I mean, this is a social media savvy community for good and bad. Oftentimes we think that social media is just, oh geez, it's a tough pill for us to swallow sometimes. But such great engagement. We're going to be utilizing the Broomfield Voice. I don't know if all of you have been able to explore the Broomfield Voice. I highly suggest you do. And then we're continuing on the best way to outreach and engage with our community as we move forward outside of our regular channels. And with that, Neil,
Okay. Thank you so much, Jennifer.
absolutely.
Let me add on the engage. One thing I've found very helpful, and I don't know, I hadn't found this sooner, the last month or so, is getting an email for all of the city council agendas.
Yeah,
Nobody knows what city council does, and they'll email you their agenda for every meeting. So it's really handy, as well as the other, what's going on in sustainability or Parks and Rec or all the other things. We don't have time for a question, but I have the microphone, so I'm gonna take some liberty. On the developments, and especially ones that the city's directly involved in, like the new town, I always forget the name of it, Broomfield Town Center?
Square. Mm-hmm.
And Square.
Mm-hmm.
And affordable housing and such. I would like to see, and I'll say it's really essential that we move toward this, set up a definite timeline to get those in line with the efficiency that we need to deal with climate change. And maybe one of the biggest parts of that is getting a deadline for when we won't accept gas hookups to new buildings. Every new, gas furnace that's put in, that's 20, 30 years of infrastructure that's detrimental to the climate. So anyway.
So I just want to, so Neil, just really quick on that point. So one of the other recalibrations that we've had is on the front end, when council lays out the expectations, Councilmember Schaaf, I don't know if he's on here because I can only see 4 people or not, but he's been instrumental in when we bring the memos that you mentioned on the emails, that all of the development review processes include sustainability, green, and affordable housing. So we have boxes now so it's not a one and done. We're still working on what that consolidation looks like, because we can't have our developers expecting to go to every single different committee for sign off, right? We need to work on that a little bit, but we are mindful on the front end of what that looks like. I think Councilmember Schaaf asked, I don't know, 24 times every time a development came in front from 2018 and 2019. What about EV charging stations? What about the solar? How clean is it? Does it burn? Is it leads? What is it, so we've packed that in to those business development plans, conversations. And again, you want to attract corporations and companies that come to Broomfield because of those requirements, restrictions, and mindsets.
Right. Some of the arguments you hear against stuff like that and other things is then the developers and employers won't come. I do not buy that at all for Broomfield. Broomfield's a great place, and they will keep coming.
Well, and we haven't seen that, right? So if you're reading your enterprises for the last 3 weeks, we are busting at the seams in our community development partner. And part of this is the last thing I'll say, part of the importance of that matrix of really understanding those 34 square miles is because if we have a development that comes in and we say no, council says no, it's incumbent upon us to say, but how about here?
Right.
How about this? This is a better fit. It's a better place. Council's already indicated from the development matrix that you fit here. And then that allows us to chase it. So if we see a really cool development, I don't know if you got Arvada, 5 parks. I had a meeting with them just this Tuesday to say, boy, we've got a spot that would really be great for you. And part of that conversation is they love that we want farm to table. We want a community partner. We don't want a developer, we call it build and hop. We want to your point, Neil, we want those people that come here that love it here, but are in alignment with what our vision is, right? Equity, clean, responsible, fiscally all of those pieces. So, yeah, I think we're in good shape.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jennifer. That
My
was
pleasure.
really terrific. There's several comments of, this is wonderful information and such. So,
Oh, good. So now I'm going to sit. So now I'm going to try not to make faces when Maddie's doing his. I'll just send him text messages on the side.
well, I just saw him get up and leave. I'm glad he came back.
I was turning on the lights. The sun's going down, y'all. Like, I don't know if you all have windows, but
It does that here too. Yes.
I know.
So people know who Matt is. He's our Colorado State House representative for Broomfield and Superior. And that's all the introduction you get, so I don't take up any more of your time.
Well, you don't need to worry about my time. First off, I want to say a couple things. I appreciate Jennifer and the team at the city very much. We work together quite often, and I've worked with Jennifer since before she was the city manager, because Broomfield doesn't really have like a paid lobbyist or anything like that. So like I was like, okay, who do I call at Broomfield to figure out what's going on around here? And she's been that person for as long as I've been in the legislature. And then she became the city manager, and that was exciting. Second of all, I'm excited to learn that I'm a millennial. I just made it up based on that chart that she showed a while ago. So I got that going for me. So I ordered a skateboard while she was talking about property taxes, or whatever it is that millennials do these days. Anyway, I'm Matt Gray. I am your state representative from Broomfield. I think most of you know that. We did just finish the 2021 legislative session. I'm going to spend just probably 3 minutes giving you the highlights, because I want to hear your questions more than I want to just sit and have you hear me talk. Biggest things that I worked on and biggest things that I thought happened. And one of the two overlaps on both. We passed Senate Bill 260, which was the biggest piece of transportation legislation that the state has seen in decades. And it's going to modernize how we fund transportation. It's going to increase funding to transportation, not just for traditional methods like the HUTF, which goes to the state and will go to Broomfield. So it will bring more money into Broomfield to fund it. But it also creates new enterprises to do some of the things that were talked about before, especially in and around electrification. Like, we know the future of especially consumer transportation is electric vehicles. And so what we're doing now is we're going to start funding, building the infrastructure for charging and support for both consumer and fleet vehicles in order to try to address our climate goals. So that's what the state direct part goes. The rest of the money that we raise goes to the traditional way that we spend money through the Highway Users Tax Fund, which is what we call the HUTF. And that money is split between the state and local governments, but it's estimated to be anywhere between $5.2 and $5.4 billion over the next 10 years, but also it's permanent. So like, that's what we're doing over the next 10 years, but it doesn't go away. It's a permanent restructuring of how we fund transportation based on how people use the roads. And it was an incredible amount of effort. It's an effort that Senator Faith Winter and I have been working on for years. And then we laid enough of a groundwork that the majority leader of the Senate, Steve Fenberg, and the Speaker of the House, Alec Garnett, said, you know what, we'll join in, let's get this thing done. This is the time to do it. And we got it done, and we got it passed. And it's complicated. And again, there's only so much time left in the meeting. I won't give you all the details, but the point is, we've been looking for billions of dollars in infrastructure funding for decades, and we got it done this year, and I'm very, very proud of it. The second thing I'll mention is what that bill doesn't pay for fully is Northwest Rail, and that's a huge infrastructure piece that the folks in our community have wanted for a long time. It does have $2.5 million, though, to fund a different bill that I passed to create the Front Range Rail Commission. And before they passed that bill, we had the existing commission, which we're going to change the composition of to make it more designed towards the metro area, because mostly right now it's focused on Pueblo. And I did it with a representative from Pueblo, no affront to Pueblo. But we changed the composition of that with the goal of Front Range Rail. But before we did that, they passed a resolution saying, if we do Front Range Rail, which the idea of that is taking rail from Pueblo, for our purposes, Pueblo to Fort Collins, for the federal government's purposes, Pueblo to Cheyenne, Wyoming, that the route it takes, it would be very expensive to go straight through the middle of downtown Denver, that the route it takes just so happens to go along the route of the rail that we were promised for years, and we never received from RTD. And there's a logical reason for that, because that route always followed the existing right-of-way that the industrial rail folks use. And so I'm not guaranteeing you that's going to happen. And you got to read the news and see about the federal infrastructure package, which, depending on what day it is, it's either a done deal or it's completely dead. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't sit around and like wait for, like, I don't sit around and trust anything about the federal government. But what I will tell you, and I can send this to anybody who's interested, is Amtrak wants to build that rail on that route. And then there's a map that shows it. Like, Amtrak has released that they want, if they get the kind of federal money they want to fund a rail from Pueblo, where it connects to the Southwest Chief, up to, which is an existing Amtrak line, up to all the way through Denver, Fort Collins, and they want to go all the way to Cheyenne, which I'm fine with. Cheyenne is beautiful, but like, I care mostly about Colorado. But we're in a place where we think that we can, if we don't have enough money, like the bill that we passed does not have it, that's another multi-billion-dollar project, and we don't have the money for it. But if the federal government comes in with most of it, like, can we find some matching funds for it? Like, yeah, I think we probably can. And the offshoot of that is maybe finally getting the rail that RTD has never been able to afford, and says, like, we're not going to get until 2045 or whatever, 2055. I don't even remember when RTD says it's coming, but it's not soon. But to get it sooner rather than later. So I passed a bill to build that infrastructure out. But the big question mark there is the federal government coming in with money, because our bill we have $2.5 million to do the environmental studies and that sort of thing, but it's a multi-billion-dollar project. And so we need support on that. And again, it's getting late. So, like, the last two things I'll say is Senate Bill 293, the bill that Manager Hoffman discussed before. We are worried about Initiative 27 that would cut income taxes across the board. And so we passed a measure that would mitigate the worst impacts of it. We definitely don't have enough money to talk about that, because I know people have questions, so I won't get into it, but know that, like, the reason we did that is to try to protect income tax streams and not diminish them. But to say, hey, during the times where we were at a higher level, we'll offer people something higher, such that it gives us an argument against Initiative 27, which is designed to just demolish those revenue streams permanently. But there's not enough time for that. And the last thing I'll say that I'm proud of is the first bill I ever introduced was to stop the process where folks who are not charged with crimes, folks who couldn't pay traffic tickets lost their driver's license, and therefore were charged with crime when they drove after it. I'm sorry, they couldn't pay a fine. Because of that, you lost your driver's license, and then driving after that became a crime. And I had to deal with a ton of that when I was in the DA's office. I thought it was wrong at the time. And so as soon as I got to the legislature, the first thing I did was, the first bill I ran was, let's stop that. And I couldn't get it done because it costs a lot of money, because it turns out the government makes a lot of money and we've got to balance our budget. So they're like, well, you got to come up with $2.5 million. And I'm like, well, I don't have $2.5 million. And they're like, well, then you can't do that. So we decriminalized part of it. But this year I found a partner named Leslie Herod, who happens to be on the budget committee. And if you want to find $2.5 million, what you do is you team up with somebody who's on the budget committee. So like she found us $2.5 million, and we did it. And so we passed that bill this year. Also, it's, again, that's my 5-year project that I work, like I have 2 5-year projects that I passed. One was trying to straight out transportation funding, and one was getting rid of the idea that just because you can't pay a fine doesn't mean that you lose your driver's license until you can find a way to do it. And I was happy to do that. And so that's my update. I would do a longer one, but I don't make people stay here all night. But I want anyone who has an opportunity to ask, like who wants to ask questions, I want them to be able to ask questions. So fire away, anybody who wants to.
So Matt, that actually segues into the question that most people have asked about, and that's Senate Bill 273, which goes to cash bonds, basically. So if you want to talk about that, and the questions are, why did you not support it? Because so many people did support it, including our district attorney here in Broomfield, and also Boulder and several others.
Sure. No, I've had that question in a number of contexts. So Senate Bill 273 would have done several things. The ideas behind which I definitely supported. And there are folks who will tell you that me and Representative Shannon Byrd are the reason that bill didn't pass, and that's the truth. Because it was me and Representative Shannon Byrd, well, at least within our party, I should say, because we were the 2 Democrats who voted with Republicans to not have that bill advanced out of the House Finance Committee. And that's the truth. There were 2 things that we asked for. We asked for the removal of felonies in the presumption of no arrest with respect to crimes. And it's complicated, but like the presumption that a person would not be arrested with respect to crimes and would be issued a summons went all the way up to a class 4 felony. And I'm not going to describe everything with respect to like all the things that are involved in class 4 felonies. And there were some exemptions, but not all of them. And I don't want to get too much into crime, but there's some serious crimes that are involved in felonies up to that level. And when I come from a prosecutorial background, and when you're a prosecutor, the way you learn about crimes is from the victims. You don't learn about it from the defendant. You're not allowed to talk to the defendant for constitutional reasons. So I don't, I spent time, prosecuting crime, and I never talked to the people who are defendants because they're not supposed to talk to me. They have constitutional rights to not talk to me. So the people I talk to are the people who are affected by it. And so what we asked for is, for serious felonies, let's take that out. Let's deal with misdemeanors. And that was an amendment that the sponsors weren't comfortable with. And okay, that's all right. And the other thing we asked for was discretion for police officers, for even if they were in a situation where what the bill did is it said you just don't arrest people under these circumstances, right? Like for these crimes, you don't arrest them, you issue them a summons. And the idea there is like, look, we're over incarcerating people. We're, putting too many people in jail. And you just don't do it. And what we asked for was an exemption for like, look, even if you're in a situation as an officer and even though the only charge you can make probable cause on is not one that's on the list,
but you're seeing a situation where you think that somebody could get hurt, or you think that an additional crime is going to happen if you don't intervene, then you can take somebody into custody, at least for the amount of time it takes for them to bail out, which is not all that long. And that's the part that it concerns me is like I've been involved in this system, which is I'm not, a lot of people said a lot of things about me on that bill, but like I once ran across a courthouse trying to find and collect all of a defendant's cases that I could find, to get them all dismissed as quickly as I could, because it was this guy who I just didn't think should be in jail, but he had like 4 different cases with 5 different public defenders, and they didn't know what I was doing. They're like, that's not what prosecutors do. I'm like, well, it's what I'm doing today. But I care about the balance between victims and defendants in the criminal justice system. So I believe in the rights of defendants. I believe that the criminal justice system disproportionately impacts people of color. You know, I believe that we need to fix it, and I have voted for bills to do that. Again, I ran a bill this year to do that. That said, completely saying like dangerous things can happen and law enforcement can't intervene even if they feel like there's a dangerous situation going on, that was a little too far for me. It was a little too far for me to say law enforcement, they do not have the right to intervene, you know, and I don't even call law enforcement, like, because I know the humans, like I used to work in this, like the human beings who every day run towards the gunshots, right? Who run towards the danger. If they feel like, look, there's something dangerous going on right now, and I want to remove this person from that situation, I have probable cause that they committed a crime, and I want to remove them from that situation, that I was going to vote to say, no, you don't have the legal right to do that, because I've seen too many law enforcement officers save the lives of too many people. And so it's complicated, right? Like I understand that, you know, law enforcement officers also, you know, there are times where they overstep their authority, and not even that, like the gentleman who's going to go to prison in Minnesota, like that's not overstepping your authority, it's committing murder. He was convicted of murder. But like I've seen too many times, those are the things that you see in the news. Those are the things you see online. But there's also on an average day, like on an average Thursday, like tonight, I've also seen law enforcement officers run in and save people's lives, and taking away all of their discretion with that respect, I wasn't comfortable with. And I'll take anybody, and I know that this is the end of the meeting, but anybody who wants to ask, like, I see there's 60 things in the chat. I'm not going to go read the chat, but like anybody who wants to ask me any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you
Yes,
address
ma'am.
the fact that felonies are not at all, they weren't a part of SB 273, so everything that you just said wasn't relating to the bill to SB 273. You might have been maybe reacting to SB 62, but felonies were not a part of that. Police absolutely still had discretion to arrest. And, you know, I've just heard you agree that systemic racism exists in our justice system, but I'm not sure why you would ignore the voices of the people of color, the women of color who co-sponsored this bill, the data about racialized policing in Colorado. We are 5th in the nation for police killings of Black people. And I'm not sure why you would ignore the voices of the victims, the families of the victims of police violence who have begged for this bill. So I'm a little bit confused by your answer, because I don't think you were addressing 273. I think you might have been talking to 62, and this doesn't seem in line with the values that you have espoused.
I will take that question. Thank you, Ms. Broom. It is true that there was a Senate Bill 62. I never read it. Like I knew it was in the news. Senate Bill 273 did include class 4, 5, and 6 felonies. Like, and I mean, like, I can show it to you. Like, you know, it's in the version that's there. So like, I'm not lying when I say that. That was my request, was to remove them. And that's why. So I hear what you're saying, and I hear people's frustration. And again, like, I've done a lot of work to try to clean this up, but it is true that one of the requests that I made about how to change it was to remove felonies from it, and class 4, 5, and 6 felonies were still included in 273. I don't even know which ones were included in Senate Bill 62, because I didn't review Senate Bill 62. I don't work in the Senate, I work in the House. But when I had to review 273, when it came, those were there. I made the request of the sponsors to remove those, and that was not something they were comfortable with. I respect their decision. And I don't know if they respect mine, but I made my decision based on their decision. I was not going to try to hostily amend their bill. I was not going to try to amend their bill to make it my bill. It wasn't my bill. It was their work. It wasn't my work. So I wasn't going to try to change it. But we put in writing, here's the things that we would like to see happen, and they weren't comfortable with that, and that's okay. Sometimes we disagree.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Neil.
Yeah, sorry, Jesse, because we are past 8 o'clock. And I really appreciate your question. And you started to ask a question just now. Is there something different or going over that same?
No, I just wanted to clarify that the felonies were not in the summons provision. They were in the PR bond considerations. And so, you know, for you saying worrying about, oh, well, they won't be able to arrest, that it still doesn't answer. It doesn't answer what the bill actually said. So I just wanted to bring up that point.
Well, and I acknowledge that what Ms. Broom is saying is exactly correct. If I said it the wrong way, then I said it the wrong way. That was with respect to the PR bond provision. She's correct.
Okay. Matt,
I did. Where I wanted them to be removed from was the PR bond section, not the summons provision. Ms. Broom is correct.
Matt, do you want to put your email or some contact in the chat?
Yes.
If anyone wants to continue the conversation with you?
Yes. Plus, you can send do send me emails, because the tweets there are plenty of those too. You don't get the same response if we talk there. But yes, my email is in the
Twitter and Facebook are not the place.
It's not great. It's not great. But yes, no, I am happy to talk about this. I mean,
hi, Mr. Gray. Would you have?
Go ahead.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. Would you have time to answer one more question?
I mean, I'm here.
I just want to know if
we can anybody else who wants to drop, like, I know there's a lot of people who are passionate about this. Like, I think it's fair, and this is Neil's meeting, it's not mine. Yeah. It's fair to let other people drop off, but I'm not, because it's 8 o'clock. So anybody who wants to, this is a very passionate thing. So I think it's fair to let everybody else say, if you want to go and go. But I'll stay for a while, because I know people care, and I'm not afraid to answer questions about it.
Let me say, before people go,
thank you. I just wanted to know if your endorsement by the Fraternal Order of Police influenced your decision.
Just a second,
Ms. Pucci, I will. I promise I'll answer that question. But let's let Neil end his meeting, because he's the person around here.
For our meeting in August, which is on the 12th, it'll be in person at the Broomfield Community Center, and it'll actually be hybrid, both in person and on Zoom. And I think we're going to have, actually we'll have Brian Mason, the Broomfield and Adams County DA. And then we're going to have most of the meetings going to be, I'm not sure what form, but some sort of conversation with the Broomfield City Council candidates. So, okay, with that, go ahead, Shannon.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to know if your endorsement.
Wait, let me just finish what I should have said.
By the Fraternal Order of Police influenced your decision to kill SB 273. Sorry.
Anyone who wants to leave, really thank you for coming. And we'll continue this conversation. It's 8:06, so maybe till 8:15, and then we'll cut it off. Okay.
So to Ms. Pucci's question, no. not at all. I didn't speak to the Fraternal Order of Police about this bill at all. I was endorsed by them in 2016 and in 2018. And one of the reasons is the local Broomfield officers who are part of the local FOP were people that I prosecuted domestic violence crimes with, that I prosecuted DUI crimes with, and are people who I knew to be public servants who are profoundly dedicated to protecting the safety of our community. And so, yeah, I was honored to be affiliated with them. I didn't apply for their endorsement in 2020 because the national direction of that organization got so aggressive that I just didn't like it got like, I'm going to call it Trumpy. Like it got Trumpy, and I told them that. I was like, I'm not asking for it. So if you'll see, I was endorsed by them in 2016 and 2018. And it's because the people who I sat at a Starbucks in Broomfield with my friends who I prosecuted domestic violence crimes with. And they said like, hey, tell us about your values. And they knew my values because we did that together. But the organization as a whole, I've never had anything to do with. Like that's where I come from. Yes, life is complicated, right? And I am not backing away from the police officers in Broomfield who protect the people in this community, because I've sat next to them while we fought domestic violence and sexual assault and the horrible things that happen in this community. So I'm not backing away from that at all, but I don't care. I did not ask for their, if you want to look at my endorsements, I was not endorsed by them in 2020 because I didn't ask them, because the political arm is not what I care about. I care about the folks who actually do the work and finding the right balance.
Okay, did that cover?
Anybody who asks questions, like you can like I'll take like there's a lot of people here. I'll take any question anybody has. Like I've got time. I'll stay. I'm not afraid to answer questions.
So Shannon, that covered your question, did it? Maybe not the answer you want.
It did, thank you. It's kind of funny though, because 40% of police officers admit to domestic violence themselves, but yes, thank you.
I just wanted to
okay, who's next? Jim, you have a question?
Oh yes, please, thanks. I mean, so you addressed the issue about the bail versus the PR, the arrest versus the PR bonds, but there's still the issue that in the bill, police still had discretion to arrest in dangerous situations, but that was one of the things that you cited as wanting to be changed. So I wonder if you would address that was actually in the bill.
It was limited in a way that there were concerns from the folks who actually do this day to day that their discretion would be so limited that they would not be able to actually enforce that provision. It was too limited, and we asked for a slightly broadened provision based not just on what was in the bill, but also based on broader discretions based on public safety. But I admit there was a provision that did kind of address that in the bill. But what we asked for based on consulting with the people who do that work was broader than what was in there. And I admit that.
I'm actually kind of curious, like, what is it that makes you think that police should be the architects of their own reform, though? They're the ones that are perpetrating the harms that this bill was trying to mitigate. So in, consulting them and, asking them like, well, how much power is too much power to take away from you? Don't you think that's kind of letting the fox rule the rooster's nest, or whatever that phrase is?
I mean, and this is where like, here's the fundamental break we're gonna have. I believe that we need to have reform on systemic racism in every single sector. And I don't believe, like, if you're concerned about systemic racism in law enforcement, let me introduce you to education, housing, like any area of our society, right? We need to break it down everywhere. And I've done a ton of that work. And if you want to see my resume, I can send it to you. But that said, I don't agree with the characterization of law enforcement as being the fox, because I've seen too many officers who have done too much sacrifice in their lives, including those who have died, to call them the fox. So we need, like, I have a more nuanced view than that, is what I'm saying. They are not the fox.
I hear that, and that's totally fair, and I appreciate that, and I understand that was maybe language that was not appropriate for this conversation, especially given your relationship to that. But I would like you, could I send you some data on what policing is like in Colorado? Like, we have data from across the state that shows, you are at 8 times more likely to be killed by a police officer if you're Black, 4 times more likely if you're a Latinx person. Like, we have a lot of data that shows, I know individually, I'm sure you know amazing people, and I'm not trying to disparage those who would, like you say, run towards the bullet. But what I think we have to look at is Colorado as a whole and go, we have some major, major problems here. People are dying. People are dying, and we are, by maintaining the status quo, we're letting them continue to die. And I don't think that the ones responsible for these numbers, if you would let me send them to you, should be the ones solely in charge of, telling us, no, we can't, we won't give up that much power.
Yes, and first off, yes, I will read whatever you want to send to me, but also don't confuse disagreement with ignorance. I've decriminalized a ton of things during the time. Like, the amount of decriminalization that I've done while I've been working is a ton. So don't confuse disagreement with ignorance. I didn't agree with that particular bill, but I am open-minded. I will read all of it, but don't confuse disagreement with ignorance. Like, I have decriminalized more things than most people in this state will do in their entire life. So like, it's not that I don't understand what you're saying. I just happen to disagree with this policy, but it's not because I'm dumb. It's not because I didn't pay attention. It's not because I'm like ignorant to this. It's that I didn't agree with that bill.
With just a couple of provisions in that bill, right, Matt?
Right. No, I mean, here's the thing. We're going to pass a bill, like, the way this ends, we're going to pass a version of that bill next year that's just a little bit better. Like, that's how this is going to end. Like, we're going to do that work. I mean, and I'll tell you all the story. Like, again, like, anybody who wants to leave can leave, but I'm also like, I'm not going to not be accountable to my community on this stuff. So within about 45 minutes of when I voted against that bill, I had a bill that was mine that died. It was killed in committee, called the Power Act. And it was designed to expand the ability of folks to get accountability for sexual harassment in the workplace. And it was right at the end of session. And it was, transportation is the thing I cared the most about. And it was also a Senate bill. And it came over, and there were some folks in the Judiciary Committee who just didn't believe in the parts of it that thought there'd be too much accountability for companies who had atmospheres that had sexual harassment occurring. And my bill died. And was I excited about that? No, because I wanted to work to try to decrease sexual harassment in the workplace. And like that bill died it was like 45 minutes after the other one was, but it was also the end of session. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to come back. I didn't get the bill that I needed to get the votes. I didn't get the votes. But I also didn't, like, the folks who killed that bill, I don't hold any ill will towards. Like, people can vote the way they want to vote. Like, but part of it is like, sometimes your first try isn't the best try, which I'll tell you as somebody who also carried paid family leave for years until like that didn't succeed until it succeeded. So like, it's not, I voted the way I voted not because I don't understand. It's because I like, well, like this isn't the version, but I also think that there's going to be a version that comes next year that understanding the challenges will pass and will be successful, and I'd love to pass. You know, like, and again, I'll even say, because I don't like okay. At this table, there was a day where I had to sit and have one of the hardest political conversations I've ever had was sitting at this table right here, and it was with Neil and Lois, and it was about Proposition 112, and I told them, like, I didn't support Proposition 112, and I had to sit and explain to Neil and Lois, this is why I don't. And they were not convinced, but they understood that I would be honest with them about it, and we walked away from that conversation. And then I was a co-sponsor of Senate Bill 181. When Senate Bill 181 came along, I was like, you know what? Like, this is a version of this that I can do, and it's paying off dividends incredibly. Like, we have a system. I mean, there's still challenges, and this is not to bring up oil and gas, because we definitely don't have time for that, because now we're way over time. But like, you know, sometimes the answer to the first question is no on your way to get to yes. And my answer is yes on bail reform. My answer is yes on arrest versus summons. You know, like, my answer is yes on all those things. That just wasn't the version. That wasn't the version that I could support. But I'm not saying I'm pro arrest and pro incarceration. Like, that's not where my heart is. Again, and I was a DA, but I was also a DA that got a lot of people out. Like, it's not that. That policy was not the policy that I would like, that I could agree to. But there's going to be one. And my guess is it'll be next year, because they're going to iron out the wrinkles, and we'll do it next year is my guess. And there's a great number of versions of those reforms I could vote for.
It's hold on a second, Jim. So it's past 8:15. But let's take, one or two more questions. And Matt's right. We had that conversation on 112 and disagree. And honestly, I disagree with him on this particular vote as well.
Right. Which I accept, by the way. That's the reason I'm saying here is that, like, I want you to know that, like, disagreeing with me on things is completely okay, and I get angry at nobody. Like, yeah. I am perfectly comfortable with people disagreeing with me. I am perfectly comfortable with it.
I'll also add a story. I was canvassing for Matt 2 elections ago, I think, and came to a door, and there's a fellow out on the porch of their house, and he said, and I told him I was canvassing for Matt. He said, hold on a second, let me get my wife. And she came out and with tears in her eyes talked about how Matt saved her son's life. Her son was arrested for drugs, and he got him basically out of the system and into help rather than prosecuting. And so Matt's heart is definitely in the right place on this stuff. And yeah, so I just want you guys to know that. Okay, who's next? One question?
Jennifer's been trying to ask a question for a little bit.
Okay, where's Jennifer? Not Jennifer Hoffman, I assume. Jennifer Cushman?
There's a Jennifer Dillon in the chat that was trying to, I just saw her thing asked a couple times.
Oh, sorry. It's hard to follow all of these things. I don't see her in here anymore. Do you know what the question was?
Yeah, can you hear me? I'm here.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and my question is, Representative Gray, don't you think that more so than your vote no against SB 273, but the way you did that in the Finance Committee for a non-financial reason, isn't the whole point of being in a certain committee that you're in a Finance Committee, you're lending your financial experience to recommend or not recommend bills go to the House floor? SB 273 had the votes to pass that in the House floor, and you used your position in the Finance Committee to kill it. And that just seems like gaming the system. It just seems like a real kind of abuse of that position to take an outsized, to use your power kind of in an outsized way. And I just want you to answer for that because I really don't agree with that.
I mean, that's a comment and everybody heard it. There's not really a question there, but everybody heard it and I sat here and listened to it. So.
Well, I mean,
Thank you.
don't you think that, what do you think of your role on isn't that what a committee is supposed to, a member is supposed to do? Did you have a finance reason?
Every member, including people who I disagree with, including the people who killed, again, the bill that I was working on that was trying to prevent sexual harassment on the same day. Everybody has their own reason to vote on the bills that they want to vote on, but I don't hold anyone, I don't say that anybody has to vote away they don't want to vote, whether they're Republican, Democrat, you name it, independent. How they vote is is up to them. And that's also true for me. I don't feel guilt about how I vote whenever I vote when I'm up for voting, and I don't judge or hold grudges against anybody else for how they vote or when they vote or how they vote.
Okay, anyone else for a quick question?
Yeah, I mean, my question is kind of just about contacting you actually. Well, and it also has to do with, I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us now, but it was actually fairly hard to reach you before. I think I've heard from a lot of people who said the same thing, but I know for me personally, I tried calling your office probably half a dozen times in the month or so leading up to the committee vote, and it was voicemail every time. I left a couple of voicemails, never heard back. I think I sent an email, and I was just kind of trying to get a grasp on how you felt about the bill, and that was my main goal at the time. And I just sort of never really knew, and neither did anybody else. And so as a constituent, it kind of felt like it wasn't possible to reach you on that. And so it makes me wonder if I emailed you about it after tonight, will that do anything? Will you respond? And do you think that you should have been more responsive and open about how you felt about the bill leading up to the vote?
Sure. Nobody was checking my voicemail during all of this because my aide was not allowed to come to the building, and to check your voicemail, you have to physically be there. And I did not have the time to physically check my email because we were in the middle of a pandemic. So to the extent that, and that's on me, I have apologies for you to the extent that you thought the best way that you should get a hold of this person is by telephone, because they're physical telephones, and my aide was not my aide was there for, I'm saying, a week, because I told her, don't come until you've been vaccinated twice. And I'll admit this openly, we got vaccinated earlier than everybody else because we're lawmakers, and that's life, that's where we are. And there are plenty of lawmakers, again, I'm not saying it's all party lines, but there are plenty of lawmakers from the other party that said they're never going to get vaccinated at all, and I didn't want to get COVID, so I got vaccinated really early. But so to the extent to which you thought hey, I need to get a hold of my lawmaker, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to call him on the phone. There's nobody who was checking that phone for months, but that's a COVID thing. That's not I don't want to hear from you thing. That's a COVID thing. But here's the thing, my cell phone number is, if you want to write it down, text me right now if you want to, write it down. My cell phone number is 303-668-7954. And I do respond, my email is getting better now, but I want to show you that I'm not joking about actually responding and talking about these issues, because these issues aren't going away. This issue is coming up again next year. This session is done. So what's in the past is done. There's going to be another version of this next year, and I want to hear from you next year. But my cell phone number is 303-668-7954. And that's how you text me. That's how you text me if you, if there's something that you feel like you need to hear, which half the people who are still left on this call. And again, God bless you, because you got to be getting bored by now, a lot of you, but and poor Neil wishes this call was over a while ago, and he's going to cut us off here in a second. Yeah. But just know that I will respond. I can't promise that, I can't promise you the answer you want, but I can promise you an answer. And that's my job as an elected official. So And Neil, that's probably a good place to leave it because I feel like Neil wants to go to bed and I want to, like, I go to bed at 8:30 and it's 8:26. So it's, I like to kiss my kids good night as well, but just know that like, this is not the end of any of these conversations, no matter what the issue is. This, like, all these conversations keep going, and just know I'll be a part of it with you.
I really do appreciate it. And before you said that, Matt, Jessie had a half a question out of her.
No, it's fine. I'll do more.
Oh, thanks. Oh,
Finish that and you can finish.
I'll do,
off
no,
the-
I'll do, I'm not, I don't want anybody to think that I'm afraid to talk about this. Like, I'll do it. Jesse, go.
You've done more than most or all other people in the position, I'm sure. So go ahead, Jesse, and then
go, Jesse.
I appreciate it. Honestly, it's just a comment of thank you to you, Matt Gray. That was it. Was a comment of thank you, and Neil for hosting and for staying longer, and how excited I was to hear you say that in your heart, you are for decarceration and you are for ending cash bail. And I, not hearing from you before this, I didn't know that's who you were, what you stood for, and I'm very excited to talk to you about next year's bills. And I just want to thank you for saying that publicly. I didn't know that about you. And so I really look forward to working with you next year on getting this legislation passed, because it sounds like it's in your heart of hearts who you are. And I didn't know that before this because we just hadn't heard. So
yeah, no, I mean, like, that is absolutely who I am and where I'm from. Like, I haven't responded because the only place that like, in every meeting I've been in, I've had this conversation. There's only been a couple of them.
Mhm.
I don't respond to people on Twitter, like, and that's where a lot of it's come from. And like, I trust me, from a, not just on this issue, from a mental health perspective, when you're an elected official, like, it's not,
I can imagine.
you know what I mean? Like, so people said like, oh, you're not responding because you haven't responded to tweets. And like, just me, like, you get deep enough, and it, like, there's no bottom when you're an elected official who does big things. And again, I'm not saying this is a controversial thing, but like, so like, just know that, like, it's not like, if you text me, I'll always respond. I just gave you my cell phone number. If you text me, I'll respond.
That's awesome.
I will. I don't respond to angry tweets because there's no bottom to that. Like, there's no health at the end of that.
Well, I
So,
look forward to the conversations that we'll
yes,
have. Not
absolutely, absolutely,
Thank you for staying late for us too. We appreciate it.
absolutely.
So Matt.
And thanks, Neil, for letting us stay late. We get to stay at your house a little late.
I'm glad to be here. There's other people here who have to be here that are probably snoring.
I think it's fair to leave, and also my kids' book time ends like literally at 8:30, and I would like to kiss them goodnight. So I think it's good to end this conversation now, but also know that like this isn't the last conversation. Like there are more to come, and reach out to me and I will continue it.
You're talking about legislation for next session. Is now the time to start those conversations, Matt?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's not like turbocharged now, but the best conversations start way ahead of time, right? Like, when we built transportation, we built it starting in the summer of 2020, and that was super hard because it was COVID. And it's still kind of COVID. Like, I don't even know where we are right now. Like COVID light. I don't even know what this is. Like, I'm not in charge of that. But yes, it is never too early to reach out about legislation ideas you have on anything. Because I got a clean slate. Like, transportation was my senior thesis. Like, I turned it in, it passed. Like, we got it done. Like, so I've got space now, much more space than last year.
Awesome. That's awesome. And congratulations.
Yes, and thank you. So like, reach out and talk to me, but it's never too soon. Like, I do have another job, and that's the one that pays my mortgage. So it's not always like right away that the response comes, because I actually am like next week I'm going to Disneyland. So like, I'm going on my first vacation in 2 years. But it's not like I still look at my phone, like, so like I'll still be around. So just reach out and let me know your thoughts. I don't care if they're critical. Like, I'm not precious. I don't have ego about this. If you're like, look, I'm disappointed in you for this thing. If you need to get that off your chest, get it off your chest and send it to me. Send it to me directly. I'll do it. I read the things. I just don't do it on Twitter. I do it with folks who I know to be my constituents who will show up. So let me know. Like, I can see the disapproval in Neil's face when it happens. I've known Neil for too long. Like, I'm sorry. Lois too. Like, I know when Neil and Lois are disappointed in me because I've known them for too long. But also, like, we've reached comfort. But anyway, we should let everybody go. And I want to go say goodnight to my kids.
Matt,
I want to go say goodnight to my kids.
as the official host of the meeting, I am going to turn it off.
Dude, turn it off because I got to go say goodnight to my kids.
Yeah,
Thank you all.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you so much.
Shannon, Jesse, Jim, all of you.
Bye, y'all. Have a good